Stephen Temple is a...
I'm a bookseller.
Long-time bookseller. Iconic bookseller. Specializing in...
Canadian literature, but not the canon. The lost, what I call our lost literature. And I have some out here to show you just what I'm really up to these days.
Well, why don't we start with that, and then I've got some books that I brought in, and we can just sort of discuss your thinking pattern when you see a book coming in from someone. What goes through your mind? How you think you're going to price it? Why you might price it that way? That kind of thing. You okay with that?
Try. Well, we can try. I certainly don't know today's prices for every book. I'm really quite out of touch with a lot of
your prices. What you think you would put up on a book? I guess you'd have to research it a bit.
I do comparison to see where things are. I like to try and find a kind of a middle ground. I don't like to be the one that sets the highest price or the lowest price.
Yeah.
I just try to find what I call the consensus of informed opinion on the internet. It takes a little knowing to know who might be reliable, whose judgment you would pay any attention to, and others are sort of obvious idiots or people you don't know anything about, and there's so much follow the leader on the internet. A lot of these guys they're just drawing all of their insights or whatever from somebody else. They're parasitic because they haven't been in the trade for real, and they haven't seen trends, especially with modern first. I sort of shy away from really recent books because an awful lot of speculation goes on, and I look and say, what are you talking, $1,000 for that that book? I mean, here's all these great Joseph Conrads I have. They're not that much money. What are you talking about, And eventually, with time, a lot of things do find kind of a reality, a price that it might sell at, and often it's radically less than some chancer who throws it up and runs it up the flagpole and see who's going to salute. And well, in the old days, before the internet, collectors kind of there was a certain say a fire under your butt. I better buy this now because I might not see it again, But now they know that, well, I'll just wait, I'll find one at a price I want to pay. What's the rush, Well, not everything, but a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It's online, and
there's less urgency than there was before. Less urgency,
That's right, yeah.
Motivation to buy.
Yeah, I mean, then sometimes you get something that's truly rare, truly wonderful. You might sell it sooner than in the old days, but... A lot of stuff, there's no urgency about it particularly. And
the other thing, too, is, some books will take years, 3, 4,
decades
5 to sell, right?
And there's nothing wrong with the book or even that you've got it at an inflated price. It's just there's a limited number of people want that book at any price, and, there are other copies to choose from, and it just languishes. A lot of what I do, the stuff never goes online. My secrets, my special lost literature, I buy a lot of it online, but I don't put it online. I am not going to tip my hand why you could get money for this book, why it might matter.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Because then I'd never be able to buy it again.
Because your understanding of that book, as soon as you put it online, everyone will see that and bump their prices
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll never be able to buy it. I just bought, Frank Prewett, the Toronto poet who went off to England, fought in the war, got invalided out, knew Sassoon and Graves, and knew everybody. Hogarth published one of his collections. Heinemann did another. Graves did edited his posthumous collected. I think he's what you call a Georgian poet. A traditional poet, but of some merit. And he had some admirers any rate, he wrote one novel, and it's a novel about the Luddites, and it was published in the 30s. 30s fiction can be difficult. If I had another life to live, I might just specialize in 30s fiction because there's so many rarities because of the economic conditions. Just a lot of stuff published in the 30s. Good luck in finding copies in any condition. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I just bought a copy on the net from England in a jacket. I've had it twice before, no jacket. I got a very good price for those jacketless copies. Here comes one for $1.25 from England. Just a steal for me.
Because they just didn't know.
Well, he's not totally unknown. If you just...
No, but the seller obviously had no idea.
Yeah, and I guess. I mean, he charged $125 for it. He may have had some idea, or maybe not. A lot of... Well, what these guys do, and it drives me crazy, is no copies online today. Must be a valuable book. Yes, so. This really kills me in this lost Canadian literature stuff I do because I can't. There's a lot of stuff I'd like to buy, but they've got it priced too high, and for no good reason except there was no copy online. So when they put it up at a price that I can't buy it as a specialist. So it drives me crazy sometimes.
That's what you hear all over the place, is that booksellers will check it online, and if there's only a couple copies there, they're happy, and they put theirs online and put the price up, just because, as you say.
A lot of these newbies don't understand the fundamental principle of rare books. Rarity alone does not make a book valuable. It's a combination of things, not rarity in isolation, and I often make this absurd example. What about my last month's gas bill? It's an extraordinarily rare printed document. In fact, it's unique. Mm-hmm. So what's it worth? Well, it isn't worth anything because it isn't important, and nobody, including me, wants it. It isn't worth anything, but it's as rare as you're going to get. So rarity alone, just all by itself, is not the primary factor. You get some funny old novel and there's no copies online. That doesn't mean it's worth $100.
Well, there has to be a story attached to it, right?
You have to have a hook. Yeah, I can tell a story about this novel, and it matters to us. Outside of Canada, maybe not so much, but he's a known quantity. Frank Prewett, a lot of the guys know of him.
What do you mean, the guys? The librarians?
No, I mean the better dealers, the pros,
I see.
Literary specialists that kind of has some judgment and sense of history and so on.
The more knowledge you have about this subject area, the more finds you're going to make.
Absolutely. And
you can walk into a store where no one would realize that book's worth anything except for you.
Yeah.
Which makes it exciting.
Well, that's what I like about what I'm doing is I have virtually no competition, and it's really unknown territory for the most part. I'm the bibliographer. I make the first stab at making some bibliographical notes. What color of the cloth? Do you notice a cancel in it somewhere? What's the story? And then after years go by, you start having more than one copy of this. You say, that's a little different from the... why is that? Why are there two colors of the binding? Is there any priority? Why does this thing have a canceled title leaf? Things like that. And I'm like, there's really almost no reference I can turn to. I'm on my own. I'm a pioneer. And I like that. And what's it worth? It's worth what I say it is. Because
you're the expert.
There's nothing to compare it to.
Yes.
So those are some of those sorts of things, and they all have stories.
Well, let's have a look at some of them.
Alrighty. I just sold those to a library.
This whole
that stack? Yeah, I left them out before I packed them, just so we could. Some of my, I think they're cool.
Yeah.
This guy is of no great importance. He's Toronto. He wrote a lot of crime novels, published in England.
Guy Morton.
He also wrote under a pseudonym. But, that's a pretty difficult book to find in Dust Jacket. It's not all over the place without Dust Jacket, because he wasn't a big seller, in obscurity. But he was a Canadian.
And look at that. I haven't heard of this publishing house. It's Skeffington and Son.
Yeah, their imprints are not as common as Murray or Shadow or some of the big names. I don't know how long they lasted. But a lot of this genre fiction, you'll run into these lesser publishers, and they can be devilishly hard to track down, Mm-hmm. Most of the print run would have gone to lending libraries. Not so many people would have walked in a bookstore and bought that book. This is a religious Grant Balfour, a minor writer. He wrote other things. Mother of St. Nicholas. Well, she was a Christian martyr. St. Nicholas was from Asia Minor. And this is a novelization of her life. I can't remember her name, but it's a pretty scarce book.
Where's she from?
Well, she.
The mother, where's the mother of St. Nicholas?
Well, she, I guess, Asia Minor.
Okay.
I don't know what century St. Nicholas flourished in, but...
So the connection to Canada is that the author
is a Canadian,
okay.
Otherwise there is no connection.
Yeah, okay. And what's his story?
I don't know. I don't know a lot about him.
Do you know where he
never
lived?
looked into it and see if there's anything interesting about him particularly.
Most
of the books I've seen by him are kind of bordering on religious fiction, or they're pretty minor. Maybe there's a story. I just don't happen to know it. I've never looked into it.
But again, the story that sold this book is that he's Canadian. That's it?
Well, it's going to a library. Not many libraries have that title. So the few that sort of want everything,
I see.
That fills. I don't have to make a case for its merit, nor did I price it. What did I put on that? $50 or $60. Mm-hmm. And not huge. Where was this published? Oh, Pool Publishing. They weren't in business very long. Toronto.
So, how did you learn about him in the first place?
Sit down with the reference book. Waters' Checklist of Canadian Literature is my Bible.
Yeah.
I go through that thing and what's this? Never
just
heard of that. And then I can look at libraries, the few that'll, like University of Toronto. Mm-hmm. Well, they don't have a copy. Can I find a copy that's decent condition that I can buy? Because, I have a sense of this can't be a $500 book. I couldn't even see it being a $100 book, but maybe. But, the sky's not the limit, Compared, he's not important so far as I know.
He's just Canadian, and they want all Canadians.
That's right.
Okay.
Then there's that's sort of another very minor figure published in what is that? Saint Jean, Quebec.
Saint Jean, Quebec. Yeah, St. John's, spelt in the English way. Yeah, St. John's, Quebec. Yeah. The New Steam Printing House, 1877. Yeah. A novel by W.H. Brown, She Might Have Done Better, in 2 volumes.
I think he published a couple of other novels. Again, I don't really know if there's any story about him particularly. That's sort of a mechanical process or something like that. Be scarce enough.
Yeah. So you found this, and again, he's Canadian. That anything else?
In that case, I don't have a story other than...
But that sells it, just the fact he's Canadian.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Now, there's a story there. What have we got? The Martyrs of Catacombs?
We do.
James DeMille, anonymous. I knew of that title. I think it's his first novel. St. John, New Brunswick professor. His novels are pretty popular in his day, in the 19th century. He wrote a series of boys called... Brethren of the White Cross, kind of adventure yarns. He wrote the strange manuscript found in a copper cylinder, one of the relatively few fantasy novels of 19th century Canada about a lost race at the South Pole. And he wrote a lot of novels, frankly.
And he was a prophet in New Brunswick.
Yeah.
And he's published by Carleton and Porter out of New York.
Yeah, that's his first one. That's pretty scarce. I'm not sure if I've had one before.
And again, you're one of the few people on Earth that would realize that when you saw this, that this is
The
something
Martyrs
to
of
pay
the
attention to.
Catacombs rings a bell with me. Now, I might have to... Who wrote that? But the title stuck in my brain. There's a Montrealer, Alan Sullivan.
Yeah, he won a GG.
Yeah.
This one's called The Jade
Yeah,
God.
Oriental Mystery. He wrote a lot of kind of, popular fiction. A few with supernatural themes. So this has a little supernatural content. Oriental kind of.
So that would appeal to, first of all, any organization or person that's interested in Canadian, but also fantasy.
I think the Merrill collection has it. I didn't look because I've only recently reestablished I've only recently been able to sell them anything after all these years.
Because
of the librarian they had. She's gone now, thank God. See, allegedly, I could never get anywhere. I'd offer things and get no answer, and I was told she only likes to buy from select dealers, and I never sold a thing. This woman is interesting, and there's finally a book on her, Lily Dougal. She was spent most of her career in Scotland. She was a biblical scholar and a bit of a philosopher and a bit of a feminist. And there's a hint she may have been lesbian. It's not really clear. She lived with another woman for many years, but they could have just been friends. Doesn't matter. She's a serious writer, focused on the Christian narrative, but not mainstream. She has different takes on it. Mm-hmm. She wrote a number of novels and a number of nonfiction books of a religious philosophical theme. And now there's a book on her. So she's not a nobody. This one I like a lot.
yeah, it's a handsome looking book.
Set in Quebec, it's a Queen's Quorum title. Ellery Queen, way back, wrote a book of what he considered the most important detective novels up to his time. And this is a Queen's Quorum title. Set in Quebec, the author is British. The only backwoods detective, I think he characterized it. Kind of a rough and ready backwoods kind of guy. Fairly scarce, and that's a lovely copy.
Kind of a precursor to Louise Penny.
I don't know what connection other than they both write mystery stories.
Set in Quebec.
I think. Oh, okay. Well, I think that's his only crime novel. He wrote nonfiction, travel and exploration stuff. Kind of an adventurer, I think. So I was really pleased with that one.
I think you're setting an example not just for other booksellers, but for book lovers generally, and that is investigate the books you have. It's fun.
Take a different path. There's too many people decide they want to collect books and they just go down the same well-trod paths, which means the highlights are going to be expensive.
Yeah.
Explore something different.
Well, so what you've done is you've identified a period, let's say prior to the 30s, and Canadian writers that there isn't much research on. So
No.
what kind of using that kind of thinking, what else could people go after?
Well, I've often
fruitfully?
suggested, why don't more people collect books about their profession?
Yeah.
Why don't dentists collect books on dentistry, accountancy? They all have a history. It can be pretty interesting if you bother to dig into it, if you actually like your profession. Show some imagination. I mean, so many times I've had young collectors, I'd like to collect modern first edition. I want Hemingway, Faulkner, and Fitzgerald, and say, well, you got a lot of money.
That's right. It's been done before. Yeah.
Now, this guy, Robert and James, his brother who didn't write so much, but Robert Barr was from Ontario. He worked for the Detroit Free Press for a while. Then he went off to England, and he wrote a lot. I think there's one important crime novel. Some with supernatural elements. Others are just straight fiction of various quality. He knew all the boys, Conan Doyle and the popular writers of his. So he's a good B-string writer, but he was prolific. Most of his books are not set in Canada. A few are.
Yeah, I noticed that this book belonged to Thane Benedict of Iona, Michigan.
Oh, yeah. He did pretty well in the marketplace, but it's popular fiction. This guy is really interesting.
This is Alvin Schwartz, the Blowtop.
He was an American, and he wrote for the comic books. And who did he create? What was his big character that he created? One you've heard of. At any rate, he spent his last 40 years in Canada. He did some work for the National Film Board, and this is possibly the first consciously existential American novel. The murderer, the guy who gets killed, is a small-time marijuana dealer in the village. This novel was a bit raw. Not everybody wanted to publish it.
Marijuana back in 1948 is pretty...
Kerouac and Ginsberg knew that book and were inspired by it.
Wow. How'd you find that out? Were you reading about the beach? You just sort of came across that, or...?
I don't recall exactly how I came to learn about this guy. But he's kind of known, and some of the American dealers know of him. This guy was a distinguished Crown attorney in Toronto.
J. N. Kennedy.
Yeah. And he wrote a few crime novels. This one is, what is that, it's Murder in Reverse, hey?
Crime in Reverse, yeah.
The attorney did it. And the story is about him kind of framing up his client for the crime. And apparently the courtroom stuff is fairly accurate because he was a somewhat distinguished attorney. And he did other things.
It's published by Thomas Nelson and Sons.
Yeah.
How would that work? Because then it's London, Edinburgh, Paris, Melbourne. This is where they've got Toronto and New York. That's where they got their offices. Where would this have been produced then? London. Okay.
Usually the first place at the imprint is the place. Not always. Sometimes they put London in the middle.
Yeah.
But it's Nelson was a
British.
A London mainstream British publisher, and he's not going to.
They had a presence in Canada, didn't they?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if there was a Canadian issue of that or not. Mm-hmm. Where they take the British sheets and put a Toronto title page on it. They had an agency here.
What do we got here?
This is kind of obscure.
Mrs. Coghill and Mrs. Stevenson.
Yeah, there's two novels and one in there.
Okay.
And you'll find her, no great merit, but I think she was originally Irish, and she was over here a while and went back to England. Mm-hmm. That's set in England. It's just kind of scarce. I've had it before.
What's funny here is that she goes by, in bold type, she goes by Mrs. Harry Coghill, her husband, and then in small writing, in brackets, Annie L. Walker. Yeah. So just a sign of the times there.
Yeah, it's probably kind of pious fiction of the time. But you'll find there's a nice website of, I think, hosted out of Simon Fraser, early Canadian women writers, and I often learn things there because there's not a lot known about some of these people. What have we got there? John Mackay. He was British. He came over. He was a Mountie for a few years, went back, but most of his novels are set in the Canadian Northwest, such as this one.
This is called The Rising of the Red Man.
It's about the Riel Rebellion.
A novel about the Riel Rebellion?
Yeah, there was
quite a few of them.
A number of those.
That's great. And what's this?
That's a Cooper and Beatty Christmas greeting giveaway kind of. It's an extract from one of Leacock's books. I forget which one. It's just a nice, production.
Yeah, they were design printing.
Yeah, they were really very good.
Yeah, well, they had Alan Fleming, didn't they, working for them?
May have done. Yeah.
Yeah. When were they active?
I think they went into the 60s, maybe early 70s, from kind of mid-century, I think. I don't know exactly. But, an interesting printing house of quality. So there's that.
Okay.
Maybe a couple out of here that these are the ones I didn't get an order for this time. I'll have to move on to another.
What do? Do you put this?
prospect.
Do you put this together in a kind of a catalog and send it out to people you think might be interested?
Well, one at a time.
Oh, one at a time.
They're earmarked for a particular library. I know they don't have it, or apparently don't have it. And so I don't, they're really not available until they let me know. This guy, there's not much to comment on him.
It's a beautiful cover, a jacket.
It is. It's very
it?
nice.
Yeah.
I think you wrote. Well, there is one of his books, and I wish they'd have bought it.
This looks like it's BK. That's the artist, right?
I pondered who might have done that work, but I expect it was British, and I don't know. Yeah.
It's lovely. There's sort of a little pond and a little cottage in the background.
Yeah, two of his novels have supernatural overtones.
Leslie Reed, and this one's called Salt Acres.
Yeah.
And this is what, set in Canada?
No,
or he's
none
Canadian?
of his books were.
He's a Canadian. This is published by Dutton in New York.
Yeah, it's the American edition.
Right. It's a handsome one.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that's interesting.
Yeah, that's striking.
That's a Spanish Civil War novel by Ted Allen. Lies My Father Told Me. Scalpel and the Sword, the biography of Bethune.
Yeah.
He fought in the MacPaps in the war. Trying to think of their other Canadian Spanish Civil War novels. If there are, I can't think of them.
It's called This Time a Better Earth. And again, you find most of these online?
Mm-hmm.
Just basically people putting them up because they don't know what they are.
Well, where are you going to find old fiction in stores these days? You don't see it. When I started, there were places I could go that had funny old fiction in quantity, but they're not around anymore. There's another Robert Barr.
That's a beautiful cover.
Glorious copy.
Wardlock,
Yeah,
publisher.
They did a lot of...
Lord Stranley, philanthropist.
Mm-hmm.
That's gorgeous. There's gold gilts on the cover, a lot of sort of small squares pattern.
That was used on several titles, that particular design.
Okay.
So we don't need to talk about all of them.
No.
This one is one of the more important novels by a Canadian woman of the time. Apparently she wasn't really that gifted as a writer, but it had serious intent. It has some place in Canadian women's studies.
It's quite a hefty, it's like 500 pages.
Yeah.
And her name is Margaret.
It's not a big rarity. I think I have another copy or two downstairs.
Okay. Margaret A. Brown.
Yeah, that's her only book, I believe.
A Lady of the Snows.
Well, this one needs no introduction.
Yeah, there's Lucy Maud.
The British retitling and the American titles and the Wendy Populars.
As if that's going to sell more, I guess, down there. That's the thinking, obviously.
The publisher is a little worried about Wind and the Willows out at about the same time, and so the Americans wanted a different title.
That's a good...
And that's a British edition.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to have a proof copy of it, the only proof of a Montgomery book I've ever seen in my whole career, which I'm hoping to sell. What's this other one here? Here we go. No, we have to stop here.
Oh, good. Okay.
Generals Die in Bed by James Yale Harrison. One and a half dozen best World War I novels. It's pretty...
In your humble opinion.
Not just my opinion. He was an American, but he came up to Montreal, worked for the newspaper there, fought with the Canadians in the war. There's a pretty harrowing scene in there of him bayoneting a German soldier who's probably 14 years old, and the guy's begging him, and his brother's down the trench, and he's dying too. And then there's this story toward the end, the Canadians liberate Arras, And they come into town. They've been on the forced march for a couple of days with not much to eat. And the town is deserted, but the shops are full of ham and wine. So the Canadians kind of helped themselves a bit. The officers were not pleased, but the buggers were hungry, and there it was, and they probably deserved it. They didn't, burn the town down. They just broke a few shop windows and got a little drunked up. Well, who can blame them? I would have too.
I've never seen this publisher before either. This is Noel Douglas, 1930.
That's right. He went, and that's the true first, and he wasn't around very long.
That's a neat little colophon or logo they've got. It looks like a flamingo, eh? You call that a flamingo?
Yeah.
See that the penguins aren't as original as you might think. This is a flamingo back in 1930. So, and of course this is a classic. Who has seen the wind? So what's special about this one?
It's the American first.
Okay.
They chopped about 7,000 words off it out of the text, and that text was what was used to reprint that book until when in the 80s they finally brought out in Canada the full original text. It's a lot scarcer than the Canadian issue edition, and textually significant.
So, but the first Canadian came out in the same year, 47?
Yeah, but no, the text was the complete text, that's right.
Okay.
But when they went to reprint this book for mass consumption, they used the American text.
They meaning the Canadian publisher? Yeah.
Everybody
Who was the Canadian publisher?
Macmillan, I think. I don't know. Later on. So it's a classic whose real text was only restored late, but that's the text most people read. That one doesn't need any comment. A dog story.
Okay.
By a Canadian. Grant Allen, one of my favorites.
From Wolfe Island.
Yeah, he left Canada early.
Yeah.
And, knew everybody. Was fairly prolific and interesting. He was a free thinker and a real promoter of Charles Darwin. And, had some scientific bent, although no particular training. And a lot of his novels are forgettable, but some of them there's a couple that are supernatural that are really sought after. And important crime fiction.
This is the New Amsterdam Book Company. What's the story on them? Do you know?
Well, they were prolific in the great days of the piracy and fiction up to the 90s, where there was international copyright. There were all kinds of cheap publishers, New Amsterdam, and there's a ton of them, and that was mainly the kind of stuff you'd see from them, is pirated. What's that?
This is Tilda Jane's
Marshall Sandals. Beautiful Joe. She wrote a ton of dog novels.
Okay.
So this is another dog story. And here's the most interesting Leslie Reed. The other ones aren't, but that one...
Cauldron Bubble.
Yeah, that's solidly SF fantasy and pretty scarce.
And it's signed. And it's by Gollancz, 1934.
Yeah. And the most common of all Canadian books is that book. However,
it's Canada, the foundations
they
of its
did
future.
150,000 of them over the years.
Stephen Leacock.
It was a Seagram's giveaway.
Yeah.
But this is the limited issue, which ain't so common. I think there may have been 400 of those, and you got this padded leather. And some of them old Sam Bronfman signed and Leacock signed, and it's a nice book, but completely unsaleable in the regular edition.
It's a private and limited edition. So who printed this? Do you know?
Seagram's. Well,
themselves? Like
no.
They had Lovell or someone like that printed, or
I'm sure the printer's name there somewhere.
Okay.
I don't remember, but they paid for it. It's a nice production.
Yeah.
So the most common Canadian book, but an uncommon edition. Okay, so that's...
Yeah, I'll just quickly ask you though, what's it like to live in Welland in your home and operate out of your home compared to on Queen Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Queen and Spadina?
Yeah, yeah.
Sort of a hothouse.
For many, many years.
Let's say it's much quieter. Very much quieter.
Not so much walk-in traffic.
This is not a bookish town. This is part of the Rust Belt. So much industry was here, it's gone now. It's kind of the Sahara of the Beaux-Arts and Mencken's memorable phrase. No books around here that I can see. I thought there might be down the peninsula here, an older part of Ontario settled, I'm not finding any books here at all.
Yeah, in terms of estate sales and stuff like that?
I go to a little auction in St. Catharines, and it's pretty.
Yeah.
Once in a while, somebody will call me to look at their books. I look at the Kijiji listings, and what they're flogging is just dreck,
Yeah.
I thought there might be some books here, and maybe there are somewhere, but I haven't gotten wind of them. And my buddy down in Port Colborne tends to get, if there's anything happening, he tends to get first call because he's been there a long, long time. And
that's Richard Shue.
Richard Shue.
Richard Shue, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
He, the odd time he gets something out of Welland. It's not a great hunting ground.
And that's, that's a part of it, certainly. You want new books coming in so you can refresh your list, right?
Yeah, well, booksellers love to buy above all else.
Well, in fact, that was the
great
focus.
Fun when I unwrap one of these things and I get to play with it for a little while.
Yeah.
Then I forget about it. But
okay, well, let's just turn to some books that I brought in for you to have a look at, and if you want them, and we're able to do some kind of trade.
These are for sale. Is that what you're saying? I thought you wanted to comment on them.
I want comment on them. If you're interested in them, then I'm happy to do something with you. If you're not, we won't.
Well, we'll have a look and see.
Sure. This actually is just for you to. Well, let's just see here. Of course, I'm a book hunter. And I just found these in Hamilton, in a little bookstore in Hamilton, and they're first editions. And I know I got a pretty good deal on them. However, and I'll just say they're part of Anthony Powell's Dance the Music of Time.
Yeah.
So. What's your thought on how these have fared over the years?
What you want's the first three.
Because
they're scarce. Much more common the further along you go.
Yeah, because it became more and more popular, obviously, right?
Yeah.
These are the later ones.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's sort of so-so copies, so you can often find these really sharp. But yeah, I'll have to go look and see if I already have one of those or some of them.
Yeah.
But they're potentially of interest to me. Yeah.
Because there's a good demand for them all the time.
There is a demand, and he's important, and they're kind of handsome books.
The covers are just gorgeous, and I think the guy's name is Broom, isn't it? Where does it say that? Broom Lynn.
Yeah, that's right.
As I say, I only paid about $10 to $15 for each of them, and I might just want to have them for a year or so, just to fondle them and look at them. But depending on what the trade-in value is, then the idea typically is what you would give someone a quarter, or 20%, or a quarter of what you might sell it for.
It depends on the desirability. These would kind of be on the low end because they're not sterling copies, not so bad.
They're like very good, very good?
They're basically, in this one it's sun, but it probably usually is. And again, they're the later ones. I probably have a
ton of them, eh?
See that it's cocked there? Let's do something about that.
Okay. what Stephen is doing is he's running his finger every 20 pages or so down the middle.
From the back forward. This is to take out a lean. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you got to do it a few times. We've made some progress.
You did,
We may not be able to get it all out. And sometimes you'll mess them up if they're the certain kinds of bindings, they'll crack.
Right.
Like you don't do this with a paperback
Yes.
or anything bound like that.
Yeah, there's another one.
There's another one.
I just bought this because I love this book, and I know you love Larkin. This is Phil Larkin's essays, required writing.
Right.
There's some great stuff
Right.
in here, and of course he's known for that book he wrote on jazz as well.
Yeah, he missed the boat. He was strictly from Dixieland, and he had no understanding of modern jazz. He's very knowledgeable about his period, but it's not a period I care about.
But you love his poetry.
His poetry, yeah, and I probably have that. I have a little Larkin collection. I'm sure I must have a copy of that.
Okay, and you're going to see one or two of books that I bought from you maybe about 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh, dear.
Just because I know you said that
I feel
last time.
obligated to buy them. Things change.
They certainly do. Well, sometimes they go up, right?
Sometimes, not signed, yeah.
Yeah.
I bet you there's a lot of these. I'll bet you they're online at 30 to 150. I shy away from the modern stuff, you know. There's too much online. Unless I lowball it.
Yeah. You want to make a decent profit off it,
And they're
right?
not interesting for me. These things are interesting for me.
The stories are way more interesting.
Yeah, I'm finding out, but what's to know everybody? I don't even know this author. Who is this? Steve Erickson?
He's regarded as a important...
I never heard of him.
Yeah.
It's like I told you, I'm really out of touch with Volman. I think his currency is kind of down, I think, you know. Yeah, it wouldn't grab me. Naipaul would...
That's yours.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, he's a good one.
And he died quite recently.
And that's the British edition, which is the preferred edition. No thanks.
Okay. And you said no to Ruth Prower Havilah, Heat and Dust. Now that won the Booker, but...
Did it?
It did,
Let's see what I know. We'll have a look at it and see. That might save it.
Okay. Alice Munro.
Well...
Underpriced.
Yeah, unless it's signed.
No, it's not. No.
I just have a bunch of ones on consignment from an old customer, plus I had my own. Sadly, he's hard to sell.
Isn't it weird? She just won the Nobel.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Trying to get $500 for her first book in Canada. Can't do it.
Yeah, well, that's the story of Canadian literature, isn't it? There isn't that much demand out there.
Yeah, but I mean, she supersedes the normal. But I never found her very easy to sell. It's a real heartache for me.
Is Margaret Atwood easier to sell?
No.
No.
You know, her books sell very well new, but I've never seen much aftermarket for her. It's more readers than collectors.
Yeah.
I currently just brought in A Handmaid's Tale and Edible Woman, which I certainly probably might be able to sell The Handmaid's Tale. We'll have a fancy price on it. But
That's because it's in fine condition.
it's that, and it's signed, but it's because, it's an iconic book now, you know.
Yeah, well, especially
Edible
now.
Woman will languish. I've got her first book of poetry. I've had it quite a while. I had to pay a whack of money for it. But I didn't really want to do it. But
What's that one? That's the one she
Double
made herself.
Persephone.
Yeah.
I got a nice copy, but it's expensive, and I've had it a number of times before. It doesn't jump off the shelf.
Those are worth what, $2,000 or $3,000 more?
Depending, somewhere in there.
Right. That's Stephen.
I think this one is
Stephen Leacock.
GG.
That is a GG. Yeah.
Yeah, but no one cares.
No, they don't.
Cakes and Ale, a famous one with a kind of a fairly common title of his.
Right. And
The
there's
Mom isn't really that
Somerset
much
Maugham,
collected these days.
nice jacket though.
Yeah, you see it in jacket, but this is the American. The British would be better, but I'm indifferent to it. That I'm.
This is The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood.
Atwood signed a lot. She's always been very generous with her signature, and it doesn't really cut that much ice, frankly.
And did this win the Booker? One of them did. I don't know if this did or not. I think it might have.
I don't think I won a Booker, but damn if I remember. A lousy memory sometimes.
These are just little poetry books. I don't know if that's of interest to you or not. These are those Canadian poet Aaron Moray.
Not especially. Yeah, she's has a reasonably good reputation. You can't get serious money for them. They're like $10, $15.
Exactly. I mean, that's the kind of thing that would go into a store, right?
Yeah, that's right.
This is in such lovely condition. I just love this, but you've probably seen it all over the place.
Yeah, that's a nice copy, but no one cares. It's a really nice copy.
Yeah, I think I just like the book itself, so I might just keep that one.
Yeah.
Just because it's in
might
such
as
nice
well.
shape.
You're not going to get enough money for it to be of any real interest to you.
Oh, here we are. Now, this is a faded spine. Incidentally, we were just talking about the golden treasury of Canadian verse. There's a Larkin, his collected poems, but again, that's pretty common. I'm assuming.
It doesn't fetch a big premium. And it's worth something, and always will be. £55, my word.
Yeah, I got ripped off.
It's a bit high, yeah.
What's the story on Joseph Boyden? Is he tanked, or did you ever sell any of his stuff?
I never really got involved much. It's it's a sort of recent stuff. I guess this is the main one, isn't it?
That's the important one. What's that called again?
3 Day Road.
Yeah.
I really haven't had experience particularly with him.
Here's another Booker, Hotel du Lac by Anita Bruckner.
Yeah, I may have one of those. I'm not sure. I'll have a look.
And another
Graham Swift. I don't much care about.
Yeah, I think this won the Booker, but
did it?
And so did this, but you see this quite often. The God of Small Things.
Yeah, right. You do.
This Bloodletting and Miraculous Cures.
Who's that?
That's a Giller. That's Vincent Lamb.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've heard of that sort of.
And it's signed. No. Okay. This is one of the books I bought from you 10, 15 years ago.
Very nice copy.
Yeah. So you notice your writing.
But I got rid of all my Patrick Whites to an Australian dealer because I got sick of them just sitting there. And it wasn't pretty nice copy.
Yeah.
True first. But Patrick White, you get the earliest ones, they're pretty scarce, and I guess this doesn't sell. This is common. Nice copy.
Okay.
Peter Carey.
Peter Carey. Again, I don't know if this won the Booker or not, but I know he's a two-time or winner at least. This is signed.
Well, we'll have a look.
Okay. Here we go.
Oh, Dante. Oh, maybe.
What? Any comments on that? You familiar with it?
Well, I like the illustrator, and of course it's this.
Who's the illustrator?
Faux medieval Evelyn Paul.
Mm-hmm.
It's attractive enough. Oops.
That you've just seen a taped page in there. That puts it off.
Bad. This is the illustrated books need to be near fine. They're visual objects, and if they're not.
I think this might be signed. Donald Justice, maybe not.
I don't care.
Don't care? One way or the other?
Sure, he's a good enough poet.
Basil Bunting.
Pretty minor. I have stopped some of his stuff.
Well, this is one of yours too.
It's a new edition.
Yeah.
It's like probably online a $25 book or something, Yeah.
You sold me that.
Really?
Yeah.
Looks like I did. Fairly nice. Greene.
What's that one called? District and Circle?
Yeah. Yeah. I just praised her collection, her correspondence. It's Anne Settlemyer, the book is dedicated to her.
Mm-hmm.
He rented her cottage in County Wicklow, I think, for many, many years. Eventually she sold it to him. But they were pretty good friends. Her stuff went to Vic. And I had her copy of this inscribed, the dedication copy. Or they have it, I didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Great poet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just finished his translation of Beowulf. It's really good.
Yeah, he had to be badgered into that. I read some of the correspondence, and he kept putting it off and putting it off.
Okay. Here's an old Governor General's winner, the Pied Piper of Dipper Creek.
Yeah, I think I have one.
Okay.
Not really interested. Never heard of this. Is this a famous sociology?
Yeah, Park. I think I've seen it for 80, but that may be at the top.
I don't know anything about this. It doesn't grab me really.
Okay.
Sociology, what do I know?
Right, it's kind of far removed from, even though these days sociology and CanLit are kind of connected. The dumpster fire stuff and all of that.
I don't think they should be.
Yeah. Okay. What else is going on in your world? Is there anything interesting that's bugging you or exciting you or?
Well, it's pretty quiet. Pretty quiet here, I must say. The only thing that's really terribly interesting for me is these lost Canadian novels that I like.
Mm.
I don't have a source. There's no books are coming to me much. I've got an old customer who had a very good collection, particularly William Golding. It was his strongest. Well, he had the world's greatest Robertson Davies collection, a print collection.
Print
Books instead of manuscripts and all. There were a few letters and things, but the focus was printed. Okay, and I steered it to the U of Toronto. He had it earmarked for somewhere else. So I thought, no, that's not where they need to go.
Mm.
So I have to do an appraisal of that in January. That's going to be 6 figures. It's really astonishing. And he has artifacts. The family started giving him stuff. He has, scribblers of Davies when he was 7 years old, and all kinds of stuff like that, and all the books. But he was thorough, all the variants he tracked, and we supplied, and so it's a really, really. U of T would have most of these books already, but not everything, and it wouldn't be organized bibliographically like this is, consciously.
So wouldn't they just pick what they didn't have, or do they have to take the whole thing?
Well, yeah, they pretty much have to. I hope they keep it together. I don't know. They have a lot, You just mastered Massey, for Pete's sake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I kind of talked him into it to say, you really got to do this, because this is the greatest mass ever assembled and ever will be assembled. So, at any rate, my customer who died collected some other people, some other enthusiasms, and William Golding was probably the one he focused on the most. And in one of these bags here, I have Lord of the Flies inscribed. I have Lord of the Flies in a trial binding, maybe the 5th known copy. I have his rare as hell first book, as a little poetry pamphlet.
So what are you going to do with that collection then?
I'm trying to sell it for the widow.
Right.
I'd be working on commission here,
So you'd be doing the rounds with the big American?
I haven't quite decided.
Or what about the National Library in London? Do they buy anything these days?
You mean the British Library?
The British Library, yeah.
Would they be interested? They probably have those books. I'll have to do some research to see if there's any libraries focusing on Golding for just a couple of the pieces, because the rest of them are, they're around. A number of them are inscribed, that, they're around. They can all be had.
Yeah.
There's just a couple things there that can't be had.
So how does that work then? You would just sort of call your contacts at various libraries and say, do you have this?
I don't call as a rule. I email,
Okay.
So I don't quite know what I'm doing. I probably will catalog it all together and maybe send out an electronic list of it.
Right.
I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I just got this stuff, so I've only taken a small portion of his library for starters. It's just a lot. And unfortunately, a lot of it is not rare. And I'm not really looking to take on $35 books.
No.
I don't. There's no point. But he's got. I was just doing one of the Graham. He had some Graham Greene and Ways of Escape. The true first is Canadian, because what's her name? Denny's was his niece. It's Lesser Norpin Denny's. Denny's was Graham Greene's niece. So in a couple of cases, the true first is the Canadian, and such is the case with this. And they decided to do a limited edition of it, 150 copies. You ought to see the first. It's just, I don't know if I can. Let me show you.
Sure.
It's so incredibly ugly. You can't believe. So this is the earliest form of this book to be published.
Oh, that's pretty fancy.
Look what they did with it.
Jeez, it looks like a Bible.
It's
looks
horrible.
like it looks like one of those. Looks like a Gideon Bible.
So, anyway, they were going to do 150 signed and numbered,
Right.
and they abandoned it after some sources say 20 copies, others say 50.
Okay, it's
And then
signed
they
here.
sold off all the rest of them
Yeah.
to a Canadian bookseller who had them bound in plain green cloth. So there's 2 issues. I don't know who the bookseller was. I'm going to hope to find out.
Right.
But this is just hideous.
Sure
I
is.
dread cataloging that book because I really want to say something about how fucking ugly it is.
1980. Ways of Escape.
Something else, eh? The
Yeah.
corners and
Weird.
everything, bound in real.
I wonder who made those
You know how many
decisions.
Nagas gave their life for that Naga hide? There it is. Leather-like substance. There's a couple of puzzles. That might be Greene's hand. It does bear some resemblance, but I'm not sure, and I'm not sure I'll be able
To prove it?
to
It's
come
very
to
lovely.
believe that.
It's lovely, isn't it? It's very small, fine.
Yeah, and his hand was like that,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not sure that's him or not.
Yeah, 1925
Sometimes my-
Oxford Poetry
My
for Franklin.
collector got a little carried away. He's got a Alice Munro inscribed to Bob. For Bob, good wishes, Alice Munro. Well, the book is dedicated to Bob Weaver, and of course, he was very important in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And my collectors think this is probably the dedication copy, and I said, well, really, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
If it were, I think you might say something more than good wishes, because there's a bit of a debt. He championed her very early on.
He
and,
did. In fact, I interviewed about 6 months ago. Her last name is Naves, and she wrote a kind of a biography scrapbook of Bob Weaver for Vehicule Press. He was really influential, wasn't he? He was a real champion of Canadian
He
literature.
was, yeah. And they bought. He paid money at a time when nobody would pay anything.
Okay, I've got 2 more questions for you.
Right.
The first one is anyone collecting the Governor General's literary awards?
Well, I was.
I am too.
I had a great collection, and I sold it to the greatest collection. Andrew Irving, UBC philosophy prof.
You sold the full run?
I sold him all of mine, which the strength of it was the early ones.
Yeah.
Because he's done a thorough job of getting all the later ones, and he's now published in hardcover a bib of it.
That's right. That's Ottawa U. It's just
I just
come out.
ordered my copy. So that was great. I had a really good collection. I wasn't as thorough.
Well, the one book that's impossible to get, for me anyway, is The Dark Weaver.
Yeah, I had that.
You did have that?
Oh,
yeah. Of course you had that. It's pretty hard to find that. Or have you got extra copies of that hanging around?
Mine was in jacket inscribed.
Was it? Okay, is that
But
all?
it was
Is
bought
that all?
so long ago
Right.
that it was still possible to find that book.
Yeah.
Now it's just sort of vanished. It's funny, the reassessments of things from that period. Little Man by Sallans.
Got that, yeah.
I see crazy prices on that book.
Yeah.
I remember in my earliest days when I went to the Cripple Civilians bookstore to stock my store.
Mm-hmm.
That book was always there, and it might as well have had poison written on it. Like, do not buy this book. That was the conventional wisdom.
Right.
And now it's sort of dried up, and you see these fancy prices, and I can't bring myself to believe in them. I recently sold a manuscript for that book. The family contacted me in the typescript for it, and actually it went to Andrew. So that's a curious coincidence.
So it sounds to me, though, if that particular book is getting some decent prices, or at least people are putting prices on it, there is a demand for this collection.
Well, I don't see a lot of copies for sale. They must be going somewhere, and God knows it was very common. Things, when you've been in business a long time, that happens. Books that you used to see all over the place, now you don't see them anymore. They can't have done very many of them. Have you read it?
No. Of course not. I collect. I don't read.
It might be worth a read. It's got a lot of social history in a volatile time. A guy come back from the war, and might be worth a read. It's the kind of book that maybe ought to be reprinted as some kind of, at least a social document.
That's the thing about the collection of the GG's fiction literary awards. You look through the dust jackets; they're gorgeous. There's a lovely selection of dust jackets on all those books. Gives you a kind of an overview of what's going on in Canadian book design over the years.
You got the Bertram Brooker?
I do, but not in jacket.
That's
I got
a
that.
little much to hope for.
What's that?
That's a little much to hope for.
Yeah.
Just to find A copies.
I was so thrilled, I'll tell you. I just found it online. This was years ago. This is probably 10 years ago. Yeah. I just found it. I plugged it into Google, and then this dealer came up, and he had hundreds of books just listed one after the other. And I was just scrolling through them, and bang, there it was. He didn't know what he had.
Yeah, certainly that and the Salverson are real stoppers now,
Do you get people calling you up saying, I collect GG?
No, not really. I don't get many people calling me about anything except willing to sell me junk.
Like me. Okay, last question, and that has to do with book design. I'm kind of interested in the evolution of Canadian book design. So the idea is to start off with MacDonald's father and son, Thoreau, and then Betty Sutherland was important in the 50s. Then Frank Neufeld, also Robert Reed, Gordon Robertson. I just wonder if you've given any thought to Canadian book design over the years.
Sparingly. I'm not a very visual person. I do pay some attention. Sometimes I get a funny old book and I say, "Man, this binding is awful nice. Who could have possibly done this?" And like we're looking at Leslie Reed there, but that's not going to be a Canadian who did that, so there's no point. But once in a while I'm able to figure out something. A designer. There's a lot of work that's could be done in that area. We know of a lot of Group of Seven work, they're all
On books,
pretty obvious.
Like Lauren Harris, there was one big book that he did, right? I can't remember the name of it.
Well, don't ask me the title, but Varley did a lot, a certain number of
Dust jackets or end papers, that kind of stuff?
both
Right.
title pages.
Yeah.
Like I just sold somebody a copy of, there was a little anthology in 1921-22 from the Toronto Women's Press Club. It's a little collection of verse by members, and one of whom was Ellen Montgomery. So one of them has 2 poems, the other edition has 1 poem, and they're still pretty common, those books, and not expensive. But I was looking at their logo, and I said, "Is that Varley? Sure looks like him." And there in this tiny print at the bottom, he had a certain way of signing. Yeah, it's him, all right.
Yeah.
His signatures kind of spread out and fine lined. So, just, gosh, I wish I guess I sold that. There was one I really desperately wanted to. It was a beautiful Art Nouveau design on a Canadian novel from a period you don't really see much that's really tasteful, really first-rate. I never figured out who could have done that. It really haunted me. So there's lots of stuff out there, I'm sure, that's just totally unrecognized besides the obvious names.
Well, and that's what makes living in Canada and being a bibliophile kind of fun, because there isn't a lot of work that's
No,
done.
you get to be a pioneer and contribute. What other sort of endeavor can you as an amateur actually contribute to serious scholarship just on your own? There's not some, the Governor General's collection that I started, and I worked out a lot of bibliography on my way through that, and Andrew built on that, and now he's got a pretty definitive take on it all.
Is that just the literary, or is it all of them? Well, just the fiction? Or
No, he's doing all the literary awards.
So poetry and
kids' books, French,
right.
the full thing, yeah.
Okay. Oh, great. Well, that's, and that's just come out, right?
Yeah, I have my copy hasn't come yet. It's come by Canada Post. Or is it? Did they ship it by courier? I'm not sure.
Right. Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing your enthusiasm about these lost Canadian titles. That's really interesting. Probably the most interesting thing about our conversation.
It is to me.
Yeah, well enough for me too.
But I'm immersed in this stuff, This is just kind of a typical lot of stuff.
Excellent.
Can't wait for that Frank Prewett to come. It's coming from England, and in the post, who knows, I might see it by February.
That's right. Well, I think they're back to work now, aren't they? But they've got like a million backlog or something.
They're not happy. I think they're working to rule and whatever, know.
Right.
So stuff's moving, sure, but I quit shipping through them for a while, and I may stay that way. They already lost my U.S. business a long time ago. I use the U.S. Post Office. And
what do? Go down to the States and ship it from there?
No, I use a service. I can borrow them to a fellow in Williamstown, right on the border, and we're a small fee. He takes them across. I'm not going to go down there.
No.
And there's Chit Chats, which I've just signed up with, and they do that as well. I got to get off a shipment today. I got to ship those off today.
Yeah. Well, that's always a nice task, shipping stuff off to clients that have bought books from you.
Yeah, it come to good money, that one.
Yeah.
So, what are we going to do about these books? I got to assess them right now, or
Yeah, I don't know what kind of time you got. Let me just sign off by saying Stephen Temple is an antiquarian book dealer based in Welland, Ontario. Thanks again for your time.
thank you, Nigel.